In this video we will show you the whole path of creating, configuring and running an unattended robot in Sherpa Orchestrator. Let's start with preparations. In the Robots section we'll create a robot coordinator. A robot with the role of coordinator does not require a license. Its purpose is to manage the operation of unattended robots. When a job to start a robot is created, Coordinator opens a session in a virtual machine or in a user account on a terminal server. This session is maintained for as long as the robot is active. This allows the system and application GUIs to behave as if an observer were present in a session. Terminating a session after execution ensures that the next startup will be a clean slate, with no previously launched applications or hung processes interfering with the robot's work. Both of these features are aimed at improving the stability and consistency of processes execution. Let's create another robot, this time unattended. This will be our virtual employee. You will need an unattended license to run this robot. Select the appropriate one in the license field. And in the coordinator field, select the robot we created earlier. Besides that, for unattended robot you need to specify machine host or IP address. Local in my case, since both coordinator and robot are in the same network, as well as the user account name and the password. Note the format: domain/username. Next, let's create another robot with the attended role. This will be the robot that will be used by a developer for debugging and testing. You can select the local license option for this robot. Now we move to the machine dedicated to Coordinator and run the Coordinator installation file. You will need administrator privileges to do this. During the installation process you will be prompted for the server address of your Orchestrator instance and the GUID of the Coordinator robot. The robot's GUID can be obtained in Orchestrator in the Robot Settings window. After filling in these two fields, you can check the connection and continue with the installation. The installation is completed and you can end this session. Please note, Coordinator does not require a separate user account, as it is installed in the operating system as a service. So you can deploy Coordinator on one of the machines allocated for robots, to save resources. Back in Orchestrator. And we see that the status of the Coordinator is now ready. This status indicates normal operation of the Coordinator. Any other status would indicate a malfunction. Let's connect to the machine allocated to the unattended robot, with the account the robot will use. Let's run the runtime installation file. Select Unattended for current user. After the installation is complete, you need to run the Sherpa Assistant application and in the Orchestrator settings specify the address of the Orchestrator server and the robot's GUID. As you already know, the GUID can be copied from the Robot Settings window in Orchestrator. There is also an important setting in the Assistant window: timeout before logoff from the system when there is no job for this robot to execute. It's worth keeping in mind when you decide to log into robot's account. If jobs is not present, your session will be terminated after the specified time. This was a way to install an unattended robot for a current user. To install multiple robots on the same machine, you need to create an account for each robot and run the runtime installer with administrator privileges. Select Unattended and for all users. In this window you can specify matching accounts and GUIDs. And also enter a common Orchestrator address. And in additional settings, specify logoff time and local logs retention period. I installed an unattended robot for the current user, and in Orchestrator it appears with a ready status. But now the logoff timeout is over, the session ended and the status changed to disconnected. This is a normal status for an idle robot. As soon as there is a job for it, Coordinator will start a session and the robot's status will change. Let's give this robot an assignment. Switch to Sherpa Designer. I prepared a simple process. It opens an Excel table in visual mode and sends a message to Orchestrator adding some data from the table. There is also a screenshot checkbox at the Add to Log block settings, so I'm hoping to see what was happening on the screen at the time the message was sent. Now let's connect our last robot that we created for testing. In order to do this, open the Orchestrator settings in Sherpa Assistant and specify the Orchestrator address and the robot's GUID. Now our robot will be able to write logs to Orchestrator. But first, let's publish this process to Orchestrator. You can do this directly in Designer, in the expanded list of publishing options. Straight away to connection settings. Once again provide the Orchestrator address and your Orchestrator login and password. For security reasons, use a separate developer account. This account must be assigned a role that grants access to the Processes section. Use of the main administrator account is prohibited here. Let's add new process to Orchestrator. And we'll publish the current version there. One of the versions is always marked active. It is the one that will be executed by a robot that is assigned to run this process. You can see that the process and its first version are now shown in Orchestrator. And now we have everything set to let the robot run the process. Let's go to Jobs and create a job manually. Let's select our robot and the process to be performed. After creating this job, it will immediately start executing. Let's take a look at two windows at once, Jobs and Robots. You can see that the job is in pending status. Though Coordinator has already given a robot a command, the robot is not ready yet. The robot has now moved to working status, and the job to in progress. Once the process is done, job gets success status, and robot shown as disconnected. Let's take a look at the result in the robot messages section. Here is a new message. We see the robot name, process, process version, job ID, and the message itself. Also in Fields column, there is a technical data that I wanted to include. And thanks to the screenshot checkbox in the login block, we can see what was on the robot screen at that moment. But what if we want robot to start not only manually, but also on a schedule or after some external event? We'll talk about this in one of the next lessons.